Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Jessica and this video is going to walk you through painting this painting of lemons. To create this painting, we're going to start out with materials such as paper, paint. This one I'm using oil paints, but you can use anything you have laying around. And you'll need paintbrushes, only one or two, and a pencil to start sketching. So here I have taped off the edges just to get a clean line around there, and then you'll want to just kind of outline where you want the lemons. I've added some leaves around it just to fill the space. I generally start with one photo I've taken of a lemon or the object that I'm using to paint, and then I kind of just feel out where I want the objects to be. So here you can follow along, starting with, I've used some white paint and a little bit of red and yellow, and just blending in and marking in where the dark spots are, light, and just throwing on some paint to add some tones. I really go through and cover this up afterwards, so the colors do change quite a bit. So you can see as you paint over the pencil marks, it's going to bleed into that, but that's okay, it just adds in some shadow. Then I like to kind of bounce around and add in the background pretty soon in, so I can see the different colors and how the objects are gonna pop off of the page. So I'm just going in, adding, I use this Portland gray, a little ultramarine blue, and white. And the mediums I'm using to mix, if you're using oil paints, I have in my 2 jars linseed oil and GAMSOL, and then I also have a Gamblin gel that works really well to just extend the paint and create a more glossy texture. And so I definitely have a couple more lemons that I would cover up, but I went in and started with the leaves. Wanted to just get a feel of the lights and darks and how that's balanced out throughout the page. This is pretty much just a sketch. It is in my Moleskine, so I'm really going into it that it doesn't need to be perfect, and as you're painting, just kind of focus on the lights and darks that you're mixing. It can be pretty rough like this, where you're using a larger paintbrush, getting in those general shapes, and then later on, as I'm doing now, is going in with a tiny brush, adding some more details and where I want those darker shadows and textures to be. So you see I do mix the GAMSOL in there quite a bit because I want this layer to dry pretty fast. GAMSOL thins out the paint and increases the drying time. So I don't use the linseed oil until later on because I want this layer to dry so I can paint over it so the colors don't blend as much. And I did pre-mix my paints. You can mix them as you're going. You can see I do add in some different tones and places that I want it to be warmer or cooler. And I really, throughout the whole painting, only use 4 paintbrushes and only 2 sizes. So this flat brush, I have 2 of them because I'm using 2 different colors and I didn't want to clean out my brush throughout. But I do like these larger ones because it forces you to spread paint in more larger shapes and doesn't make you as precise. So now that this layer has dried a little bit, I go in with my linseed oil and and because I want to keep the background layer a little bit softer and working so I can blend it out later on, I am using that medium. I did this in a couple different settings, so if you're intimidated and you see the beginning painting and you're like, I don't know how to do this, or I don't paint, it's really just about sitting down and putting on some music, grabbing some coffee, and just challenging yourself to stay away from your phone and just getting creative. Yours does not have to look like mine. If you do this tutorial and paint any sort of still lifes or one lemon or this whole page, be sure and share it with me on Instagram. So now I'm going in, I didn't like how dark those lemons were, so I want to brighten up those colors. I'm adding some more warmer colors and a lot more white to brighten that up, but still keeping those essentially like 4 different tones within one lemon. So I want lighter shades to then that darker kind of mustard color. I'd love to know how everyone is staying busy in this quarantine, because I've been doing lots of painting and a lot more reading lately. Right now I'm reading a book on the Crusades, so not everyone's cup of tea, but it's pretty interesting. So this is a new day. I let this first layer dry and I was kind of done with it for a while, and then I'm going back in and wanted to really brighten up those highlights. So I'm going and adding here just a light cream. It looks white on the video, but it's actually cream. And then I am going to go in later on and brighten up those greens. So you can just skip this step if you already like your colors. But it is nice to add in more vivid highlights to kind of create those 3-dimensional shapes. And I do keep it pretty abstract in my brush strokes because I like that. But if you want to go in and blend a little bit more, you can use a fluffier brush and do so. And I really like oil paint because your drawing skills don't have to be amazing to do oil painting or painting in general, because you can just go back in, especially if you're using acrylics, they dry so quickly, so you can go and cover up the background or change the shape if you want to. If you don't like how a leaf looks or lemon shape is, I do go in and cover up some of my leaves that I don't end up liking. And a thing to note here that I'm doing is I am adding in shadows on the lemons and objects underneath the leaves, so it looks like they're on top and a little bit more realistic. And that just creates a little bit more of that, reinforces your 3-dimensionality in paintings and creates some depth. And when you add in a lighter color on the sides and then contrast that with a darker leaf, it really emphasizes those differences. So again, I'm just adding in the colors that I wanted to make them a little bit brighter, so feel free to skip a little bit forward if you're happy with the colors and tones that you already have. Or if you're still working on your lemon, you can definitely just work on one lemon if this is too much. This is a pretty large Moleskine, so I did want to just take an afternoon and paint. This actually ended up being a couple afternoons, but That is the beauty of oil paints. You can go back and work on it for as long as you need to. So those two lemons next to each other were a little bit too similar in their colors, so I'm adding in a little bit of a darker shade to make it look like that lemon is underneath the other. So going into these leaves, I'm really, you can see, just putting in general marks and then going in and refining where I want those highlights and blending that out a little bit more. And you don't have to have any specific, like I mentioned, the paintbrushes. I just go to the store and find ones that are a little bit soft, usually flat brush. Even my tiny ones are flat-ended. I think that gives really great texture and shapes to my brush strokes, but whatever you have on hand will work. I went through a long period of time where I didn't paint because I felt like I didn't have the perfect supplies or perfect paintbrushes that I wanted, and really I was the one who was limiting myself from just being creative. All I needed was even just like a pencil, paper. You can practice going in and refining those lines. So I really like having texture inside of the objects, but I do have areas where I like those really detailed lines and creating those smooth edges, and then other areas where I keep that abstract overlay in color. So here going with, if you're going and adding this detail, then taking a little bit of a darker color to one side of the stem shows the 3D effect, and then it just looks more realistic. So even though this is pretty abstract, I wanted to create those dimensions. So this is the final thing. I will probably go back and adjust certain lemons and spots, but it was a lot of fun, and I hope you guys learned different techniques and ways of painting. It's just about getting yourself to be creative, sitting down, even if you don't think you're a painter, anything. I think it's just important to just practice, and it's really therapeutic to sit there, especially in a time like this when we have so much time on our hands. Staying away from the computer and phone is nice to do for a little bit. So hope you learned something. Thanks for clicking on this video, and be sure to subscribe and like. You'll see more videos of my process, paint mixing, color theory, and if you have any video ideas, just leave them in the comments below. And till next time, thanks.